Welcome to another conversation off the clock. Hi, I'm Carmina Constantino Torres, and this is Casey After Hours.
Journalists are not paid as well as people think. Like, I never wanted to be on air. That was never a thing I had wanted to do. You know, there was no such thing as I'm too tired. The reality of what was happening deserved more than the journalist who was tired. You overextend yourself and there's nothing left. The journalists don't want to put themselves at the center of the story. You're not at the center of the story. You're there to witness.
I first met our next guest at a dinner hosted by a common friend. And since then, we've had bursts of conversations here and there. And I have to say, it's so easy to get carried away in our convos. After all, we always have some things in common to talk about, from being both journalists, our take on matters, from the mundane to the existential, to all of a sudden finding ourselves in our 50s. And so I thought, why don't we talk about that? And then some. Joining us today, veteran journalist and author, Marga Ortigas. Marga, nice to have you on the pod.
Thanks for having me.
I can't believe we're going to have this a burst of conversation face to face this time. Thanks for making time for us today.
Anytime for you.
I want to start from the very, very beginning because, of course, I'm going to talk to you now as an author and all that. But before that, you were a journalist.
Yes.
And I think once a journalist, always a journalist.
Yes.
So what got you into journalism to begin with?
I kind of fell into it by accident. It wasn't anything I had planned. I had grown up at the time that broadcast news came out. It was a movie that starred William Hurt and Holly Hunter. I don't know if you remember it, right? But it was a huge hit. And I remember being like, I think 12 or something when that came out. And I thought, what a job. That's so exciting. But what I wanted to do was Holly Hunter's job, which was the producer, kind of, the magician behind the scenes who's running the show or guiding the reporters and the presenters as to what the coverage should be about and things like that. But I wasn't really sure how one became that. And then I studied communications at college. And then in the third year of school, right, we had to do work placement. And I happened to get a job at the time that was with an advertising agency. And somebody there eventually told me later on, after that particular summer placement, that there was a role going in Channel 7 News, because this was the time of the Gulf War, 1991, I think it was, and CNN was becoming the source for news, especially international news. So they needed somebody to basically come and just watch CNN and then kind of repurpose whatever the headlines might be for GMA7. And I think it was cheap labor to get students, because I keep teasing my former boss and I still don't know why you would hire people who were still in college to do the job. But that's pretty much what got me my first break.
No, but I remember that was a break for you, TV news.
Yeah.
But for us, on the other side of the screen, it was like, whoa, this batch of presenters, it's something else, right? And that got, I think, the next batches of presenters and journalists inspired. So thanks for blazing the trail for us.
I think it helped people see that you didn't have to be an old curmudgeon-y person, I think, to get your start in news, because at that point everybody seemed so serious, which is not to say that we weren't. But I know that because there were three of us and we were all female and we were all still university students, it kind of let people think like, oh, so that we were learning on the job, but at the same time we took the role very seriously. So it's not like we were being flighty about it or were there for like, I never wanted to be on air. That was never a thing I had wanted to do. But we were put in front of the camera, tested to see if we could talk without a script. And then if we could, then they let us do the news.
But that's
basically what happened.
Starting that job, right? That's one thing. But falling in love with it, that's another story altogether. When did that happen to you? When did that love affair with journalism begin?
I think fairly early on, right at the start, really, because around that same time, Mount Pinatubo erupted. And suddenly I was being sent out on the field to work with the more senior journalists at the time, and to basically follow them around or do stories on the side of whatever they might be doing in terms of the headlines. So every day was different. One day you could be in the newsroom, and the next day I'm riding a military chopper and we're flying over Mount Pinatubo as it's still bubbling. So things like that, where you're like, what other job will open up the world to you in that kind of way? So by the time I had finished university, the boss then said, hey, if you want a full-time gig, you can always come and join us. And of course, who would say no to that? So that's kind of what I did. And I just, 3 decades later, it defined my life in a way. Yeah.
3 decades later, it defined your life, and then it stopped being fun.
And then it got really, really tiring. So I think I burnt out much younger than a lot of other people in the profession, because I had started so young. And it was one thing after another, and it was a time that 24-hour news really took off. So we weren't working just to hit, the primetime newscast, and then after that you're done for the day. We were feeding the beast, as it were, and you're covering the world. So there was no such thing as off hours.
Yeah.
You always had to be on. Your phone always had to be on. And when they called you to run and go to the airport because something happened somewhere, you had to be ready to do it. There was no such thing as I'm too tired. Because the minute you say I'm too tired, then they think you're not ready for the job.
What kept you going?
I think it was just feeling like you were doing something important or something that mattered. Like, I have to go and see what's really happening, because I have to then deliver that to the people who are watching. It was one of my former bosses said, it's really not a job. It was a vocation.
It is.
It was a vocation, because it wasn't about money. Journalists are not paid as well as people think. It wasn't about being self-important, because journalists don't want to put themselves at the center of the story. You're not at the center of the story. You're there to witness, right? Not participate in it. So it was really just, I was always a storyteller. And what better way to be able to do the job than to be out there and seeing all these things firsthand and putting it together in such a way that you're then able to elicit some sort of empathy from the viewing audience who might not be even in the same country as the story that you're covering. And I felt that was our role, to be the mediator, to be the funnel from this is the ugly truth that's happening here. You're somewhere else in the world. If you can do something to help, or might this change your perspective perhaps a little bit about life, then good. And that's what my role was. So I saw it more as like I was there to tell stories that hopefully mattered, not just to the people we were covering, but to the people watching it as well.
This part of you, you said a while ago that you see yourself as a storyteller.
Yeah.
Have you always been one?
Yes.
From since childhood?
Yes, much to the pain of my siblings and my cousins, because ever since I could pick up a pen, I was writing myself stories to keep myself from getting bored. Even if we were stuck in traffic, I would make up stories about people in the next car just to keep myself entertained. It's like, oh, maybe that person is on their way to whatever it is, and then I would create my own mystery stories. Nancy Drew was big,
of course,
so I would write my own stories. They were completely nonsensical.
So you're never the sweet dreams girl.
Oh, no,
you were the Nancy.
I was the Nancy Drew.
Okay.
And then after Nancy Drew, I discovered biographies. So then I was reading biographies of like the Kennedys. I became obsessed with the Kennedys for some reason.
Yeah.
There was a biopic on them, miniseries on them on TV at the time, starring Martin Sheen and Blair Brown. And I just thought, ooh, first it just fascinated me, the idea of power and, all of that, and family. So I would create these stories, insist that my sisters participate in the stories. I would make little scripts. This is your part. This is your part. They were not happy, but it's like they were my toys. I was like, you're younger than me. You have to do this. So, but yes, I've always just liked the idea of imagining other realities, imagining other worlds, and trying to understand what somebody else might be feeling.
Do you think also that also contributed to why it stopped being fun? Because here you are, you're a storyteller, you have a definite idea of how an ending should be. But as a journalist, you don't know how it's going to end. You have a hope that it will end this way, but it doesn't.
Exactly. And that's why for me, all the news stories that I did always stood on their own. And I almost saw it as like when you're writing a piece of music. it doesn't have to end in a way that will either be happy or closed,
Yeah.
right? But the piece has to make sense. So it could end on a high, it could end on a note that you're not sure of, but taken together, it makes sense. So I always saw it as poetry using video and words. And in fact, the less words, the better, because you're working with the vision that you're putting out there. And even that is, in a sense, poetic. It's like a mini film. So it wasn't just, oh, let's just slap all of this together and bahala na, and I'll put in some words and who, what, when, where, how. No, it isn't like that. For me, it was really the craft that mattered, and how do I write this in such a way that you make chaos palatable, in a sense. It was I think always an attempt to try to understand what was happening, even though you didn't.
With everything that was happening around you, and there was an inner conversation happening as well, there was a point that you said, I've had enough.
Yeah.
Why was that so clear? And then we're going to talk about the magic that happened next.
Right. It was, I had just been physically, I think, exhausted by everything, because there are only so many natural calamities you can be witness to, I feel. And unfortunately, like now, with news so readily available, I think we're all going through it. All of humanity has all of this so readily accessible. You can watch war, like from your phone. You know, you can see children being killed and homes being destroyed and lives completely upended, and it's all there on your phone. And you know what? You can choose to look away.
Yeah.
So in a way, you're desensitizing yourself to what's ugly, to the things that really should not be happening in this day and age. We should be more civilized than this. And I think it got to the point where it was exhausting, and it cost too much emotionally at that point. And I speak about this in my books, but I had lost my parents, and I didn't realize, I think, also how big or how huge the impact of that would be on me. And I just felt like I needed to take a breath. I just needed to take a breath. And it was really that. It was I got a phone call from work, and it was, you need to run to this. And my first thought wasn't, okay, I have to run, I have to do this. It was, oh no, not again. And I wanted to just throw the phone away. And that's when I thought, okay, that's not the right frame of mind for this job. Because you really shouldn't be running into something thinking, I really don't want to be here, and I'm just going to get this done and dusted and finished. It should never be rote. And when it became like that, and I was responding in a way that it was like almost like my whole body was like, ugh. I thought, okay, because the reality of what was happening deserved more than a journalist who was tired.
Yeah.
You know, too tired to look at it. So.
Is it correct to say, Marga, that from the magic that you were experiencing, it became miserable?
Yes. Yes, it did. It did, pretty much.
And you had to take your power back.
I had to rest. I felt like I hadn't given myself that. I didn't know what it meant, because even when I took those moments of rest, I was always having to do something with it. Oh, let's go and visit somewhere new that I didn't go for work, or let's go and do a drive from this coast to that coast. So there was always something. And I just needed to pause, you know. And I think we all need to pause. Put the devices away, shut the windows, don't look at the screens, and just take a breath. And as you said, not even about taking your power back, but understand who you are.
Yeah.
Take a moment for you, because sometimes you overextend yourself and there's nothing left.
I remember in one of our conversations, I said my dream day is to do nothing but just read and read and read all day. It can be as simple as that. That breath is so important.
Exactly.
And so the book writing came. Tell us about that. I mean, one can just take a break, right? But you took a break, and then you decided to be a prolific writer.
I had always wanted to write a book, as you can imagine. If like I'm 8 years old and trying to write my own fake little mystery novels. And I thought, what better time to do it than now? Because I took the pause. I was supposed to give myself a 1-year sabbatical from work. That was almost
How many
9
years
years ago. It was supposed to be a year, and I said, okay, in that year, what am I going to do? And so for like 6 months, luckily I had kind of planned for it, so I had saved up and things like that, and I just took a moment. So I went to visit cousins, I went to visit my sister in the States, and I just slept on people's couches and did that kind of thing, and just to act like a tourist with no responsibilities for a little while. And then, but the first book that I wrote had always played at the back of my mind. And my sister, one of my sisters said, "Well, you have the time now. Why don't you just try and put it out there?" I really had no plan to do it, but I thought if I'm ever gonna do it, when is it gonna be right? So I just started, and then it just one thing after another, one thing after another. It took me 3 years to write that first book, because I never felt like it was right. It's like I'd go back and redo it and go back and redo it. And
So you had that doubt.
yes. Oh, all the time.
Because
all the time.
when I would read your words, Marga, the first thought that would always come to me every time I begin is, she's so brave. She's so courageous, knowing. 'Cause there's one thing. Okay, it's one thing to write your thoughts, right? But it's another thing to write your thoughts down, write a story, and know that we're out there,
Yes.
the readers.
Yeah.
That takes a leap of faith.
The thing is, I don't know if I'd call it brave. You get to a point where I was just so in love with that book. All these characters, I had such fun fleshing them out. And I literally had...
You're talking about Kalye.
Yes, Kalye Sombra. I had a casting sheet. Like, I had faces of actors, and from here to Europe to the States, and I cast everybody because it helps me visualize things more if you have ideas of what people might look like. I had a family tree drawn up. I had everything, and the first thing I did was a mock-up of the cover, just so it would seem real to me. And I'm like, okay, now I have to populate this cover with pages, And then I did like a rough outline. I tried to do it piece by piece like that. And then I just started. And I remember not knowing, how am I going to start this? And I sat there with a blank page, and I made it a habit. Every day, 8 to 5. When the sun is out, I would sit there in front of a window and just stare at the laptop until something came. And then you just run with it. And at the end of every chapter, I'm like, eek, I don't know if I can put this out there. But then I thought, nah, just get it all out.
Talk to the writers who may be out there who's just beginning, because it seems to me that when you started this journey, you started it for yourself
Yes.
and no one else.
Yes.
If you begin to think about how it's going to be received, is that sort of a death knell to the process?
I think so. And in that sense, all of these books, as much as I have enjoyed sharing it, were all very, I suppose, selfish endeavors. I wrote them because I couldn't not write them. I enjoy working with words. I really do. So, even as a kid, they were like my best friends. I would rather sit and journal than go out and play.
Yeah.
Or if I was going to go out and play, it was because I was play acting, or I had a script that I wanted to play with my friends with, play out, like that kind of thing. So, Kalye Sombra was really a work of just passion and love. It was all the things that I think I learned about this country doing the job that I did. As a journalist, you see the ugliest sides of society, as well as some of its best sides. And you can't fit all of that in the news. So Kalye Sombra was all of it.
Yeah.
It was kind of like my therapy after all of that, because it was an examination of the Philippines as I got to know it,
And when you started to see that we were out there,
Yes.
there are many of us who are actually reading your words. I mean, that must have been something else.
It was a shock. I didn't expect it, because also I thought people are going to think I'm crazy. Like, this is a very different kind of book, the way I wrote it. I'm like, I don't know if people will appreciate it. I don't know if they'll hate the style, if they won't like the content, if they'll think that I'm just being silly with everything that I put in the book, right? But then you get to a stage where you're like, well, it's there. Bahala na. And then I'll push it out. And that's basically what it is. So I don't know so much I don't know if it was courage, because courage almost takes a more conscious act. And this wasn't. This was for me impulse. It was like, bahala na.
And sometimes that's okay, huh?
Yeah. Because like me, if I'm afraid of something, instead of sitting in the fear, I'll do it so that I get over the fear.
Oo.
Yeah.
Sometimes it
Yeah.
works that way.
Correct.
Para hindi ka na mag-iisip.
Correct. Yeah. But I'm so afraid of this. Why am I afraid of it? If I'm going to sit here and try to psychoanalyze it, I'm never going to get to the bottom of it.
Analysis,
but
paralysis,
if I try, and then, hey, tapos na. Doesn't mean I'll do it again, but I did it and it's finished.
Okay.
Yeah.
But how do you then explain from Calle Sombre to the other books that you wrote, No Falling Stars, to God's Ashes, to now WTF? Yeah. I mean, the genre, Marga, it's expansive.
Yeah.
What is that? Explain yourself. Explain yourself to us.
It was throwing up on the page. You know what I mean? Because like the No Falling Stars, which is a collection of essays that I wrote from when I was traveling for the job. So I work for international news organizations, CNN and Al Jazeera. And there was a lot of traveling involved and a lot of seeing things that I'm a girl who grew up, in Manila.
Yeah.
And suddenly I'm in the middle of a war zone in the Middle East. It was always very kind of, I could never believe it, And then I remember coming back or telling friends or even telling my family, like, this is what happened, this is what I saw. And people always said, you should write these things down. You should write these things down. My mom always said, even just for you, write them down so you don't forget. So I started to do that. And I had them all kind of hidden away, just things that made an impact on me. And at some point, I put them all together like a collection of essays. And I thought, well, maybe somebody, a little tongue-in-cheek, because I had people saying, why don't you write, journalists write tell-all books. I said, I don't have a tell-all book to put out there. I said, I don't want to do that because you don't want to make it about you. I don't want to be like, oh, I was this year's old when I suddenly decided I would, There are many books that are like that, but I didn't have one of those in me. So I thought, but I do have this. It's slightly quirky, it's slightly comic, it's maybe a little too raw in parts, but it's what it is. And how many books like this are there? And there weren't many. So I thought, why don't I just pitch it to the publisher and see if there will be any interest? But I didn't think there would be. So I pitched 2 other books that I had that none of them were complete. They were just ideas with maybe a few pages. Even this latest one, I had already chapters to go into what became this book, even years ago. And I pitched all 3, thinking like my first experience was it took almost 6 to 8 months before the publisher even responded to my book proposal. So this time I pitched it, thinking it would take another 6 to 8 months, and I hoped that by then I would have finished one of the books.
Yeah.
And she responded in like a week or 2, and she's like, great, we'll take all 3. And I was like, wait, what? And she's like, which one is ready? None? I was like, none of them are ready. And she's like, okay, well, you decide in what order, and you just tell us when we can expect each book.
For all 3 books, right? Maybe No Falling Stars, maybe in a way that was also about you, but it was more about the journey.
Yes.
But this, my dear, I mean, it's about you, it's about me, it's about anyone who's going through midlife crisis of some sort. People finding themselves, women most especially, suddenly turning 50 and everything just goes haywire. And you try to make sense of it. You tried to, but in the end, you can't.
Yes.
And it's okay.
It is what it is, and that's fine.
And it's okay.
Yeah.
And it's okay.
Yes.
So when did you start to feel that I have to put all of these things that are happening to me, I have to put it pen to paper and I have to see it now? Is it sort of also exercising yourself?
It just always, every time I feel like I'm at a loss, that's the first thing I do.
You're right.
I write. Because I'm really just writing almost to understand myself. Because sometimes I don't even have the words to express how I might be feeling about something.
I can't believe you don't. I cannot believe that you would have no words to express yourself.
Well,
but anyway, go ahead.
No, but that's really what it was. And so then I ended up with that. Because that started, a lot of the chapters there, I started writing while I was already working on Sombra. And I would take a break from Sombra and be like writing basically pages of my journal that they've now made public.
No, exactly.
But yeah.
Which brings me to the next question, because as journalists, right, we're trained so that the story won't be about
Yes.
us, right? I say this takes a lot of bravery. It took a lot of bravery and courage, because for the first time,
Yeah.
it's about you.
Weird, right? I never saw it like that, because I almost felt like I was just, I know it sounds weird, but it's
So now
like
you
an
want to
out-
take it all in,
I know,
right?
don't read the book. Do not know. But it felt like an out of body experience. You know,
Yeah.
the type where you don't realize it's you, and you're
Yeah.
just like, you're just writing and you're being honest, and then you don't want to look back at it. But what happened was, I sent it out to a few beta readers, however you might pronounce it, and then the initial editors for Penguin, who are much younger than me, and they were all like, "Oh my gosh, this is so relatable," and and I'm like, "Really?" Like, one of them was like in her 20s,
Yeah.
and was telling me it was their favorite book now, and this
Yeah.
and that, and I'm like, "How is this?" But it was good, because I didn't want it to be about just women of a certain age.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? This is a
Right.
human exercise. I think we all go through moments of fear, moments of doubt, moments of everything.
And it's okay.
And it's okay. And it's okay.
Finally, Marga, in the book, you talk about making plans, that when all is lost, by all means, make yourself another dream.
Yeah.
Talk to us about what makes you dare to dream and dream and dream and dream.
I think the inability to give up. I put that down, I think, to the line, my mother, my grandmother, they just you just keep going. Because one is never really defeated unless you stop trying, right? And there's always something else. I mean, it's such a big world, and there's so many things we can do.
Yeah.
I don't believe people are just limited by the reality that they might find themselves in. I think you can always dream yourself up something else.
Yes.
You can always be different. You can always change yourself, and that will inevitably change the world around you. And I think that is the power of human consciousness. We have chosen our own cages. We have chosen what it is that limits us. So I think if we start to see our power differently, then things will shift. And so if you're not feeling very good right now, find a way to change that. Because the only one who can is you. You know, nothing outside of you will make you feel better unless something in you switches. And so when I'm not feeling good, that's what I have to constantly remind myself. I might pick up a pen and paper to help me get there faster. You know.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Marga Ortigas, thank you for daring to dream. Thank you for dreaming and dreaming so that we can also do the same. Thanks so
you
much.
kidding? Thank you very much.
Thank you
Thank
for
you very
sharing
much.
your afternoon with us.
Thank you.
And that's it for another episode of Casey After Hours. You know the drill. Like and subscribe. I'll see you on the next one.